Close your eyes. Hear the sounds of the most famous fight song in America. Picture January in Houston. The kind of night that doesn't feel like football weather. Warm enough that the air has a softness to it, the sky overhead smudged with city light, the sound of tens of thousands of voices rising from a stadium that has held every conceivable kind of human drama. NRG Stadium. The Super Bowl, the Final Four. All of it has happened here. And now this. It is January 8, 2024. And the Michigan Wolverines are playing for the national championship. Not an outpost program. Not a program rebuilding, climbing, hoping. The Michigan Wolverines. The winningest program in the history of college football by any measure you choose to name. The program of fielding Yost and Bo Schembechler and a fight song that a United States president once requested in place of Hail to the Chief. The program with the largest stadium in the Western Hemisphere, where more than 100,000 people have shown up for every single home game for more than half a century. That program. Here. Tonight. One game from completing a perfect season. And the quarterback lines up for the first snap of the game. His name is J.J. McCarthy. He is 21 years old. He has lost exactly one game as a starting quarterback at the University of Michigan. One game. In 3 years. And that game he lost in 2022 still bothers him. You can see it in the way he carries himself. The absolute refusal to lose again. Across from him, the Washington Huskies. 13-0 coming in. Michael Penix Jr., one of the great passing quarterbacks of his generation. A crowd that somehow had tilted toward maize and blue. And a scoreboard that nobody expected to look the way it looked by the time the night was over. Running back Blake Corum carries. And carries again. And again. Michigan's run game, that relentless, punishing, Midwestern sledgehammer of a run game that Schembechler would have recognized immediately, that Yost might have smiled at, that every Michigan man who ever believed in the foundational philosophy of this program would have claimed as their own. Michigan's run game dismantled the Huskies. The final score was 34-13. Blake Corum finished with 134 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was named Defensive MVP. The defensive MVP was Will Johnson, who made an interception when the Huskies needed a play most. And somewhere in that stadium, in the maize and blue sections where the roar was loudest, there were people who had been waiting for this moment for 26 years. Since 1997. Since Lloyd Carr's team shared a national title with Nebraska and the argument never quite got resolved. 26 years. They had waited through Rich Rodriguez and 3 wins against Toledo. Through Brady Hoke and seasons that promised more than they delivered. Through Jim Harbaugh's first 5 years against Ohio State. 5 losses, some of them humiliating. Through controversy and suspensions and the constant noise from people who wanted to disqualify this run before it finished. They had waited through all of that. And now the confetti was falling. Maize and blue confetti, pouring down from the rafters of NRG Stadium, settling onto the shoulders of players and coaches and staff members who had fought for this through every piece of chaos the previous 18 months had produced. Jim Harbaugh, the head coach in his khaki pants and his Michigan headset, raised both fists toward the sky. Michigan was a national champion. For the first time since 1948 by any measurement that the full sport could agree on. That moment, those fists raised, that confetti falling, that sound, is where this story begins. Because to understand what it meant, you have to go back. All the way back to a hot day in Chicago in 1879 when a man named Irving Kane Pond scored a touchdown and the referee said it didn't count. You have to go back to a man named Fielding Yost who was the most relentless winner American college football has ever seen. You have to walk through Bo Schembechler's locker room and sit across from Woody Hayes in Columbus and understand the war those 2 men fought for 10 years that defined not just a rivalry but an era. You have to understand what happened in between. The falls from grace. The failures. The moments when this program looked in the mirror and didn't recognize what it saw. And you have to understand why all of that, the glory and the scandal and the unbroken expectation, is so wrapped up in who Michigan is and who Michigan has always been. So settle in. Get comfortable. Let the weight of the day lift. Let me take you to the beginning. The championship was real. The 15-0 record was real. The confetti was real. What came after, Harbaugh leaving for the NFL the following month, the investigations that found real violations, the penalties and the suspensions and the difficult years that followed, we will get to all of it. This program has never been a simple story and it isn't one now. But that night, in Houston, in January of 2024, Michigan was a national champion for the first time in a very long time. That is where we begin. And to understand why it meant so much, to understand what those fans in the maize and blue sections were actually feeling, we have to go back. All the way back. Let us go back to 1879. The Clifton House was a hotel in Chicago. On May 30, 1879, a group of young men from the University of Michigan checked in and were transported to a playing field at Lakefront Park, the grounds used by the Chicago White Stockings, at 3:15 in the afternoon. They were there to play football. Intercollegiate football. The first game in Michigan history. Their opponents were a team from Racine College, known informally as the Purple Stockings. The weather, by accounts of the day, was oppressively hot. The crowd was estimated at 500 people, and the game itself was played in 2 innings of 45 minutes each. In the first inning, a Michigan player named Irving Kane Pond scored a touchdown. Team captain David Detar attempted the kick for extra credit. Michigan players and the umpire both believed the kick was good. The referee disagreed. The kick, he said, had missed. Michigan did not win that game, but they had played. They had shown up, made the trip in the heat on somebody else's field, and they had put points on the board. And Irving Kane Pond, who later became an architect of some distinction, had made history. Though history on that day didn't look much like history. It looked like a disputed kick and an oppressively warm afternoon in Chicago. That is how Michigan football began. Within a few years, the program had found its footing. By the mid-1880s, the Wolverines had put together 4 consecutive undefeated seasons. From the fall of 1884 to the spring of 1888, opponents managed to score exactly 2 points against them. In 4 years. That kind of dominance, that early, hinted at something. And there is something worth pausing on, the nickname itself. The Wolverines. If you ask why Michigan is called the Wolverines, the honest answer is that nobody is entirely sure. The animal itself, the wolverine, a ferocious, tenacious, solitary creature, had mostly vanished from Michigan's landscape by the time the university was founded. The nickname seems to have begun as something hurled at Michiganders by rivals and neighbors, possibly during an early 19th century border dispute with Ohio over a strip of land called the Toledo Strip. A derogatory label, in other words, applied from the outside and eventually claimed with pride. There is something very Michigan about that. Taking an insult and deciding it was actually a compliment. Turning what someone else meant as a slight into a source of identity. The colors have a cleaner origin. The maize and blue you see at every game, on every helmet, on every piece of merchandise from Ann Arbor to California, those colors date to 1867. Before that, the university had different colors. Azure blue and gold. But maize and blue became the standard, and maize and blue they have remained for 150 years. Those colors are so embedded in the Wolverines' identity that when you see them on a Saturday afternoon in October, they feel like they emerged fully formed from the geology of the state itself. Like they were always there waiting. Michigan became a founding member of the Western Conference, what would eventually become the Big Ten, in 1896. They had been independent to that point, playing against whoever would schedule them, traveling east to prove themselves, growing slowly into something that the Midwest would eventually recognize as its flagship program. But the modern era of Michigan football, the era that established everything, the era without which nothing else in this history makes sense, didn't begin until 1901. It began with a man named Fielding Yost. Fielding Harris Yost was born in Fairview, West Virginia in 1871. He was a lawyer by training and a football coach by calling. He came to Michigan in 1901 after brief coaching stints at Ohio Wesleyan, Nebraska, Kansas, and Stanford. He was 30 years old when he arrived in Ann Arbor. He had an accent that made him sound like he was still in the hills of West Virginia. He talked fast, moved fast, thought fast. His players called him Hurry Up. They called him Hurry Up because he emphasized a pace of play that was almost incomprehensible in an era when college football was a grinding, static game. Yost wanted to snap the ball before the defense could set. He wanted to run plays in sequence so quickly that the opponents barely had time to get up off the ground. He may have been the person who invented what we now call the no-huddle offense. He certainly invented it in the sense that no one before him had used it the way he used it. He also invented the fake kick. He devised the position of linebacker, a position that would go on to define football defense for the next 120 years, and it started with a man in Ann Arbor who was too impatient to let the defense figure out what he was doing. In his first season, 1901, Michigan went 11-0. They outscored their opponents 550 points to 0. 550 to 0. Let that sit for a moment. 11 games, 550 points, not a single point allowed. The final game of the season was the inaugural Rose Bowl, played in Pasadena against Stanford. Michigan won 49-0. It was the first college bowl game ever played. In 1902, Michigan went 11-0 again. In 1903, 11-0 again. In 1904, 10-0. In 1905, 12-1. Over those first 5 seasons, Yost's Michigan teams went 55-1 and outscored opponents 2,821-42. 2,821-42. There is no comparable run in the history of American college football. None. The point-a-minute era, named because Michigan scored so many points per game that they were averaging more than a point every 60 seconds of play, stands alone as the most dominant sustained period any program in the sport has produced. It is the equivalent of Cy Young's 511 wins. It is a record that will never be broken. In 1904, Michigan defeated West Virginia 130-0. 130-0. That remained the worst defeat in West Virginia history. The dynasty ended, as all dynasties must, with a loss. At the end of the 1905 season, Yost's team fell to Amos Alonzo Stagg's University of Chicago, ending a consecutive game unbeaten streak that had stretched to 56 games. 56. Over more than 4 years. Without a single loss. Yost coached Michigan football across 2 separate stints for 25 seasons. His career record was 165 wins, 29 losses, and 10 ties. He won 6 national championships. He built, or helped build, the stadium that would eventually become the largest in the country. He installed a tradition, a standard, a way of understanding what Michigan football meant that would outlast him by a century. He is the foundation. Everything is built on what Fielding Yost did. And then there is one other detail about the early era that deserves a moment's notice. Gustav Ferbert, Michigan's head coach from 1897 to 1899. He compiled a record of 24 wins, 3 losses, and 1 tie. He coached a 16-game winning streak. He was good at his job. He resigned in May of 1900. He resigned because he left to prospect for gold in Alaska. And with that departure, with Gustav Ferbert boarding a ship in the spring of 1900, headed north toward whatever fortune he imagined was waiting in the Yukon, we close the early era and move toward the years that shaped the physical and cultural heart of what Michigan football is. There is a stadium in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that is unlike any other building in American sports. Michigan Stadium. The Big House. It holds 109,901 people. The largest stadium in the United States. The largest in the Western Hemisphere. The 3rd largest in the world. On a fall Saturday, when the maize and blue are out and the band is playing and the sun is hitting the field at that particular angle that makes everything look gold, it is one of the most spectacular sights in American athletics. It was built in 1927. Fielding Yost oversaw the construction. It was modeled after the Yale Bowl. They used 440 tons of reinforcing steel. 31,000 square feet of wire mesh. The bowl was sunk below ground, literally dug out of the Michigan earth, so that the sight lines from every seat would be clean. They built 44 sections. 72 rows. Yost pushed for 10,000 temporary seats to be added before the place even opened, which brought the initial capacity to 84,401, making it the largest college-owned stadium in the nation at the time of its opening. Michigan played its first game in the new stadium on October 1, 1927. They defeated Ohio Wesleyan 33-0. A crowd showed up. The Big House was open for business, and it has been open ever since. Every home game since 1975, more than 300 consecutive games, has drawn at least 100,000 fans. Not once in more than 50 years has the attendance figure at Michigan Stadium dropped below 6 figures. That is one of the most quietly astonishing facts in American sports. Not one game. Not during a losing season, not during a rebuilding year, not during a controversy, not during bad weather. 100,000 people, every time for 50 years. The record attendance was set in September of 2013. Michigan versus Notre Dame. The first ever night game at Michigan Stadium. 115,109 people. At the time it was the largest crowd ever recorded at a college or NFL game in American history. The stadium has since hosted concerts, including, as of 2026, the largest ticketed concert in United States history, drawing more than 112,000 people. But before we leave the stadium and the traditions that give Michigan football its physical identity, we should spend time here, in the Big House. Not in the architecture, we have done that, but in what the experience actually is. What it feels like to be there on a fall Saturday when everything is right. You arrive early because arriving early is what you do. The tailgates begin in the morning, in the parking lots that surround the stadium, on the front lawns of the houses along State Street and Main Street, in the fraternity quads and in the grassy spaces along the Huron River. People who have been doing this for 30 years set up in the same spots they have always used. Alumni who flew in from Phoenix or Chicago or New York are already in maize and blue, already holding coffee or something warmer, already talking about the offensive line. The Michigan Marching Band. You hear it before you see it. The band has been performing since 1859, one of the oldest university bands in the country, and on game day it is as much a part of the Michigan experience as the helmet or the fight song. More than 250 members. They play the victors at least a dozen times in the course of a game day, and each time it sounds like the first time because the crowd responds to it the way crowds respond to things they have loved for their entire lives. When you walk through the gates of Michigan Stadium, the first thing you notice is the scale of it. You have seen photographs. You have watched it on television. None of that prepares you for the physical reality of a bowl holding 110,000 people. The seats go up and up and up on every side, the upper rows so steep they seem almost vertical, the whole structure creating a sense of enclosure, of being inside something rather than simply watching something from outside. The student section fills from the bottom. The students wear white on designated whiteout games, creating a band of brightness across the lower bowl that contrasts with the maize and blue above. When a play goes well, when the quarterback completes a pass on 3rd and long, when the defense makes a stop, the sound that rises from those seats is not ordinary crowd noise. It is something more compressed and physical, a wave of sound that you feel before you hear. The tunnel entrance. When the Wolverines run onto the field, they come through a tunnel in the north end zone, emerging from underground into the full light and full noise of 100,000 people. Players have described it in terms that border on the overwhelming, the way the sound hits you when you come out of the dark, the way it seems to change the air itself. The band is playing. The crowd is standing. And you are in the winged helmet, running toward the middle of a field that has held 100 years of this. Lloyd Carr once said that he tried to prepare his players for that moment, tried to tell them what it would feel like, and found that no description was adequate. You simply had to experience it. That is the big house. Not the capacity figure or the attendance record. The experience. And running through all of it, through every game, every era, every generation of players and fans, is the victors. We have already told the story of how it was written. But it is worth dwelling a moment longer on what the song has become. Gerald Ford requested it at the White House. That is a remarkable fact when you stop to consider it. The President of the United States, with the Marine Band at his disposal and the full weight of American ceremonial tradition available to him, chose a college fight song. A song written in one night in 1898 by a music student named Louis Elbel, finished on a train home to Ann Arbor, performed ever since at a stadium in Michigan. He chose that over Hail to the Chief because, at his core, Gerald Ford was a Michigan man. Before he was a congressman or a vice president or the 38th president of the United States, he was a center on Michigan's football team in the 1930s. He was offered contracts by the Detroit Lions and the Green Bay Packers after graduation. He turned them down to go to law school. Ford's football years at Michigan shaped him the way Michigan football has shaped everyone who has been genuinely inside it. The team first, the individual second, the standard above everything. There are other traditions worth naming. The block M. The enormous block letter M that appears at midfield of every Michigan home game, formed by students in the stands in a tradition that dates to the early 20th century. It is one of the oldest organized crowd traditions in college football. The maize and blue pom-poms, distributed to students for wide-out games and major matchups, turned into a sea of color that television cameras cannot help but linger on. The Michigan helmet stickers. Unlike many programs that use helmet stickers as rewards for individual achievement, Michigan's helmet tradition is the wing itself, unchanged since 1938, worn identically by every player regardless of their position or their performance, because the wing is not a reward. It is a symbol. Every player wears what every player before them wore. The fourth quarter tradition, the moment in the fourth quarter of every home game when the band plays the victors and the crowd, regardless of the score, regardless of the situation, stands and sings. Not because Michigan is winning, not because the game is going well, but because the fourth quarter is Michigan's quarter. That is the tradition. That is what it has always been called. And even in lean years, even when the season is lost and the crowd has thinned to something below its usual scale, the fourth quarter tradition holds. These are the things that tie a program to its past. Not the record books, not the trophy cases. The songs and the rituals and the habits of gathering that people maintain across decades because they cannot imagine not maintaining them. Now let us talk about Notre Dame properly. Because this rivalry, this complicated, uninterrupted, century-long argument between two programs that consider themselves the most important in college football history deserves more than a paragraph. The first game was in 1887. Michigan traveled to South Bend on the day before Thanksgiving. The Notre Dame players, who had never played football before, spent the morning of game day in a practice session with the Michigan team, who taught them the basic rules and how the game was played. Then, in the afternoon, they played. Michigan won 8-0. The game was called at halftime due to a quagmire, an actual quagmire, the field apparently too saturated to continue. In the official record, this is described with a specificity that suggests whoever was keeping score had a sense of humor about what they were witnessing. Michigan taught Notre Dame how to play football, and Notre Dame has never fully forgiven them for it. The series continued through the 1880s and 1890s, and Michigan dominated early, as they tended to dominate everyone in the early era. But the rivalry took on its real character in the 20th century, when Notre Dame had become, under Knute Rockne, the most famous football program in America, and when Michigan had built, under Yost and then Chrysler and then Schembechler, a program that considered itself the equal of any in the country. Two programs with national followings, not confined to a regional base. Both arguing, implicitly and sometimes explicitly, for the title of college football's flagship institution. Both with traditions that were genuinely magnificent. Both with fans who felt that the sport owed them something, not arrogantly but with the conviction that comes from having watched something extraordinary for a long time. The series produced great games. The 1942 game, won by Michigan. The 1978 game, won by Michigan at Notre Dame Stadium in a performance that Schembechler considered one of the best of his tenure. The 1980 game, won by Notre Dame in the final minutes, which cost Michigan a chance at an undefeated season. The 2003 game, won by Michigan on the road, when the Wolverines were ranked third in the country and needed every point they scored to hold off a Notre Dame team that played them to the final whistle. And the 2013 game, the first night game at Michigan Stadium, the record crowd of 115,000 people, Michigan winning 41-30 on a night that the weather and the crowd and the scale of the setting combined into something that people who were there still describe as one of the great college football atmospheres they have ever experienced. The series ended, for now, in 2014. Notre Dame won 31-0 in South Bend, a scoreline that still stings in Ann Arbor. Brady Hoke's program was not in a position to compete that day, and the shutout was a stark reminder of how far the program had fallen from where it had been. The next scheduled meeting is September 3, 2033, in Ann Arbor. 19 years between games. In a rivalry that began in 1887, there will be Michigan fans in that stadium in 2033 who were toddlers when the series went on hiatus. There will be Notre Dame fans who grew up their entire football lives without this game on the schedule. And when the band plays the victors before kickoff, and when the Notre Dame band responds with its own fight song, and when 100,000 people in Ann Arbor fill the big house on a September night, the weight of all of it, all the years and all the games and all the arguments about who this sport belongs to, will be right there on the field. Michigan State, the little brother. The rivalry that Michigan treats as secondary and Michigan State treats as the most important game on the schedule, which creates a dynamic that has produced some of the most memorable and infuriating moments in the series' history. Michigan State was, for the first half of the series' existence, essentially a Michigan opponent, a smaller agricultural college in the same state, playing in a conference that Michigan had helped found, operating in Michigan's shadow without fully acknowledging that the shadow was there. Michigan dominated the series from 1898 to 1949, going 33 wins, 6 losses, and 3 ties across the first 50-plus years they played each other. Michigan State had not yet joined the Big Ten, was not yet playing on anything like an equal financial or competitive footing, and the games often reflected that imbalance. Everything changed after Michigan State joined the Big Ten in 1953, gained full member status, and began to build a program under coaches like Biggie Munn and Duffy Daugherty that could compete nationally. Daugherty in particular built Michigan State into a genuine power in the 1960s, winning national championships in 1965 and 1966, recruiting players from the South when Southern programs wouldn't take black players, building a multicultural roster that was decades ahead of its time and that played football at a level that demanded national respect. The Spartan program of that era was not little brother to anyone. And Michigan fans who remember only the most recent decades of the series sometimes forget that Michigan State, at its best, has been very good. The modern rivalry has its particular rhythms. Michigan tends to win the series, leads 75-38 with 5 ties. But Michigan State has had extended runs of success that have made the annual game genuinely uncertain. Between 2008 and 2017, Michigan State won 7 of 10 meetings, including games that seemed to define the respective trajectories of both programs. Mark D'Antonio, who coached Michigan State from 2007 to 2019, built the Spartans into a program that competed for Big Ten titles and beat Michigan consistently enough to shift the psychological balance of the rivalry. His teams were physical, disciplined, and motivated in a way that suggested the chip on Michigan State's shoulder had never gone away. The 2011 game. Michigan State won 28-14, knocking Michigan out of the top 10 and ending what had briefly felt like a Hoke-era resurgence. The 2015 game, the punt snap, which we have discussed, and which remains the most memorable play in the rivalry's recent history for all the worst reasons from the Michigan perspective. And then the pendulum swung back. Under Harbaugh, and particularly in the 2021-2023 run when Michigan was dominant across the Big Ten, the Wolverines reasserted control of the rivalry. They beat Michigan State 49-0 in 2021. 49-0. In a game between in-state rivals in East Lansing, with everything the Spartans had invested in the previous decade of competitive parity. That score said something about where both programs were. Michigan was ascending. Michigan State was in transition. The Paul Bunyan Trophy goes back and forth. It has been going back and forth for more than 120 years. It will keep going back and forth. That is what intrastate rivalries do. They cycle, they shift, they give each side enough wins to maintain the hope and enough losses to maintain the hunger. Michigan leads. Michigan will probably keep leading. But Michigan State will never stop trying to take the trophy, and on any given October Saturday in East Lansing or Ann Arbor, they just might. And somewhere in that stadium, in the official capacity count, embedded in the architecture since 1956, is one extra seat. A single extra seat that has never been explained. The seat of Fritz Chrysler, as legend has it. Present in the count, but unaccounted for in the physical space. Its location is unknown. Fritz Chrysler. Another name you need to know. He came to Michigan in 1938. He had been coaching at Princeton. He brought with him a way of playing offense that he called platoon football, using separate players for offense and defense in an era when everyone played both ways. That innovation would eventually lead to the modern two-platoon system that all of football uses now. He won 71 games, lost 16, tied 3. He won 2 conference titles and 1 national championship. But what Fritz Chrysler is remembered for, what you see on every Michigan helmet, every photograph, every piece of Michigan football artwork, is a piece of tape and paint. When Chrysler came to Michigan, the Wolverines wore all black helmets. Standard for the era. Bland. Monochromatic. Chrysler had an idea. He had used a winged helmet design at Princeton. He brought it to Michigan in 1938, painting the helmet in maize and blue with that distinctive wing sweeping back from the crown. His reasoning was practical. He thought the design would help his halfbacks find receivers downfield. If you could pick out the wing, you could pick out your target. Whether it actually worked that way is probably unknowable. What happened instead is that it became one of the most iconic pieces of design in American sports history. The Michigan winged helmet. You see it and you know instantly and completely, exactly who you are looking at. That is what Fritz Chrysler gave this program. That and the extra seat. Before we move into the decades of rivalry and dynasty and heartbreak, let us spend a moment with a player whose story deserves more than a statistics line. Tom Harmon. He wore number 98. He played at Michigan from 1938 to 1940. He was a running back and quarterback and kick returner. In that era, an everything player, someone called upon to do whatever the offense needed. He led the country in scoring in both 1939 and 1940. In the fall of 1940, in his final college game, played at Ohio State, Tom Harmon completed 11 of 12 passes for 151 yards with 2 touchdowns. He ran for 139 yards and 2 more scores. He kicked 4 extra points. He intercepted 3 passes. On the other side of the ball, 3 interceptions. Michigan won 40-0. At the end of the game, the Ohio State crowd gave Tom Harmon a standing ovation. Think about that. At Ohio Stadium. In Columbus, the Ohio State fans stood and applauded a Michigan player. He won the Heisman Trophy that year. He won the Maxwell Award. He was selected first overall in the 1941 NFL Draft. And then the world changed. Tom Harmon enlisted in the Army Air Forces. He became a pilot. He flew missions in the South Pacific and in the China Theater. During those missions he was shot down. Not once, twice. In 2 separate crashes on 2 separate continents. He was declared dead on 2 separate occasions. After the second crash in China, he was missing for weeks, surviving in unfamiliar terrain, making his way to safety with the help of local people who sheltered him. He came home. He received the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. He played briefly for the Los Angeles Rams before transitioning to a career in broadcasting, radio, then television. He became one of the recognizable voices of American sports for a generation. His son is Mark Harmon, the actor. His daughter Kristen married Ricky Nelson, old 98. The man who left the greatest Ohio State crowd that had ever seen him standing and applauding, flew combat missions over 3 continents, survived 2 plane crashes, was twice declared dead and came home to tell about it. That is Tom Harmon. That is what he was. And when you hear people talk about Michigan men, when you hear that phrase invoked, sometimes as tribute and sometimes as shorthand for cultural gatekeeping, men like Tom Harmon are the actual standard being referenced. Men who played the game as hard as any human has played any game, and then went out into the world and lived with the same intensity. The Heisman Trophy has been won by a Michigan player 3 times. Harmon in 1940, Desmond Howard in 1991, Charles Woodson in 1997. 3 different eras, 3 different positions, 3 completely different kinds of players, and all 3 in different ways as remarkable off the field as they were on it. We will come back to Howard and Woodson. Their stories belong with the rivalry and the dynasty that defined the 90s. But first, the 1940s, and a team that called themselves the Mad Magicians. Fritz Chrysler's 1947 Michigan team played a style of offense so elaborate and deceptive that they earned a nickname that stuck, the Mad Magicians. The single-wing formation that Chrysler ran featured multiple laterals and jump passes and direct snaps to the fullback who would spin before handing off, all of it designed to make the defense commit before revealing where the ball was actually going. The key figures were halfback Bob Shapouz and fullback Dick Kempthorne. Shapouz, in particular, was a transcendent talent. He was Heisman runner-up in 1947, beaten out by Notre Dame's Johnny Lujack. The 1947 Heisman vote, had it gone differently, would have been entirely defensible. Bob Shapouz had served in World War II as a B-17 tail gunner. In 1945, flying over Italy, his plane was shot down. He survived. He evaded capture for months, sheltered by Italian partisans in the mountains. An extraordinary story of survival and courage that most people today don't know because it happened before the era of memoir culture and 24-hour news cycles. He came home. He enrolled at Michigan. He ran Chrysler's single-wing offense and led one of the most remarkable teams in program history. That 1947 team finished 10-0. The next year, under Benny Oesterbin, who had played at Michigan, who was one of the first players in school history to earn All-America honors 3 times, who won 9 varsity letters in football, basketball, and baseball, that 1948 Michigan team went 9-0. Beat 6 ranked opponents by a combined score of 122-17. Won the Big 9 Conference Championship and the national title. In the final AP poll, Michigan received 192 first-place votes. Notre Dame received 97. It was not close. The 1948 National Championship was Michigan's last consensus championship for 49 years. 49 years is a long time to wait. A half-century between championships. And in those years, the program would go through everything: glory and mediocrity, Hall of Famers and scandals, the greatest rivalry in college football and the most agonizing losses. But the standard, the expectation, the belief that Michigan was and should always be at the top, never went away. It is worth pausing here to acknowledge a pattern that runs through Michigan's history. Not a shameful one, but an honest one. Harry Kipke coached Michigan from 1929 to 1937. He won national championships in 1932 and 1933. He was good. And then, gradually and then all at once, he wasn't. Michigan was so far removed from what the program expected of itself by 1937 that Kipke was dismissed and Fritz Chrysler was brought in to restore the standard. It is a pattern this program has lived more than once. Greatness, complacency or misfortune or circumstance, decline, correction, return. The reason it is so painful each time is precisely because the standard is so high. When you have won more games than any program in the history of the sport, every down period feels like a violation of something fundamental. Bo Schembechler understood this. He built his entire coaching philosophy around the idea that the weight of that standard was not a burden but a gift. That you played for something bigger than yourself. That individual glory was meaningless compared to what the team, the whole team, past and present, represented. He had a phrase: the team, the team, the team. 3 words. A complete philosophy. We are approaching Schembechler. But before we get there, we need to understand what he walked into, and what the program had become in the years before his arrival. And for that, we need the 10-year war. From 1951 to 1968, Ohio State's Woody Hayes won 12 of 18 games against Michigan. 12 of 18. The Buckeyes were dominant. Not just competitive, dominant. In 1968, on a cold November day in Ann Arbor, Ohio State won 50-14. They led by enormous margins throughout and kept scoring in the fourth quarter. When the game ended and someone asked Hayes why he'd gone for a 2-point conversion with an insurmountable lead, he gave one of the most unrepentant answers in college football history. Because I couldn't go for 3. Woody Hayes. The man who did not know how to be gracious in victory because he did not believe in graciousness in victory. He believed in domination. He believed in running up the score as an act of will. He believed in punishing opponents not merely until they accepted defeat but until they accepted humility. He had come from Miami of Ohio. His assistant there, a young, ambitious, West Virginia-inflected football mind named Bo Schembechler, had learned at his knee. Schembechler had been on Hayes' Ohio State staff. He knew every tendency, every preference, every blind spot. And in January of 1969, Schembechler was hired as Michigan's head coach. He was 39 years old. In his first season, Schembechler brought an 8-0 Ohio State team into Ann Arbor. The Buckeyes were defending national champions. They hadn't trailed in a game all year, winning every contest by at least 27 points. They carried a 22-game winning streak. They were a 17-point favorite. Woody Hayes called this team the best he'd ever had. Michigan's players had watched the 50-14 game. They had watched Ohio State go for a 2-point conversion when the game was already decided. They had listened to Hayes' answer about why. The final score was Michigan 24, Ohio State 12. The upset, and it was a genuine upset, one of the greatest in college football history, didn't just win a game. It announced an era. It said, these two men are going to fight this fight for as long as they are both here. It said, nothing in college football will happen in a vacuum for the next decade, because everything, ultimately, will come back to Michigan and Ohio State and the men on their respective sidelines. Schembechler recalled Hayes telling him afterward, you will never win a bigger game than that. And Schembechler, who was honest about these things in a way that great men sometimes are, said Hayes was right. He didn't think he ever did. Schembechler served as Michigan's head coach for 21 seasons. His record was 194 wins, 48 losses, and 5 ties. He won or shared 13 Big Ten Conference titles. His all-time wins record at Michigan has never been broken. His final edge in the 10-year war was 5 wins, 4 losses, 1 tie. By any objective measure, he won. But that is a narrow way of seeing it. What Hayes and Schembechler built together, what their rivalry created, what it gave to the sport, what it made the fans on both sides feel, was something neither man could have manufactured alone. They needed each other. Schembechler coaching without Hayes across the field would have been a great coach working in a great program. With Hayes there, hostile, brilliant, vindictive, legendary, Schembechler became something else. He became the defining figure of an era. And the philosophy, the team, became something that Michigan fans carried with them everywhere. It was the phrase Jim Harbaugh cited when he lifted the national championship trophy in 2024. It was the phrase that Schembechler's players tattooed on their arms and quoted at funerals and used to describe something that most of them found nearly impossible to put into words, what it meant to have played for Bo. Bo Schembechler was not just a football coach. He was an institution. And to move through his 21 seasons at Michigan in a single paragraph would be to miss entirely what made him the defining figure of this program's modern identity. So let us slow down. Let us spend some real time here. When Schembechler arrived in 1969, Michigan football was a program in need of something it could not quite name. Lloyd Carr, who would later coach Michigan to a national championship, once said that what Schembechler gave the program was a belief, not just in winning, but in a way of doing things that made winning feel earned rather than accidental. That distinction mattered. It still does. Schembechler's offense was not pretty. It was not designed to be. He ran the ball. He ran it again. He ran it until the defense broke, or until his own offensive line, which he regarded as the most important group of players on the field, established a physical dominance so complete that the other team stopped believing it could win. His teams were not built for highlight reels. They were built for November. 4 cold, gray Big Ten afternoons when the only thing that mattered was which team wanted it more. His players understood what that meant. They understood it in their legs on conditioning days in August, in the two-a-days that were harder than anything most of them had experienced, in the film sessions where Schembechler would stop the tape and look at a player and say nothing. Just look, until the player understood exactly what he had done wrong and exactly what it was going to cost him if he did it again. He was not cruel, but he was demanding in a way that brooked no negotiation. And the players who came out the other side of that, who survived the conditioning and the film sessions and the standard that never moved, became something. Not just football players. Something harder to define. Men who understood that the gap between what you are and what you are capable of is closed only by work, and that the work is never finished. That is what 40 years of Michigan men are actually talking about when they talk about Bo. In 1971, Michigan won the Big Ten title. In 1972, they won it again. In 1973, the tie against Ohio State and the faculty committee vote that sent the Buckeyes to the Rose Bowl instead. In 1974, another tie with Ohio State, another year without the Rose Bowl despite an undefeated record. In 1976, 1977, and 1978, Michigan won 3 consecutive outright Big Ten championships. 3 straight. Against competition that included some of the best teams the conference had ever assembled. Those 3 years are perhaps the clearest expression of what Schembechler built. A program that did not fluctuate based on talent turnover, because the system was stronger than any individual player within it. And yet, the Rose Bowl. Schembechler went to the Rose Bowl 5 times. He lost all 5. That record is one of the genuine mysteries of his career. He was not a coach who lost often. He was not a coach who failed in big games as a matter of habit. And yet in Pasadena, something consistently went wrong. A fumble at the wrong moment. A field goal missed. A defense that had been excellent all year that gave up 1 drive too many. The Rose Bowl losses became the asterisk on Schembechler's otherwise magnificent record. The thing that critics pointed to, the thing that Ohio State fans cited, the thing that kept his legacy just slightly complicated. He went back anyway. Every time the opportunity presented itself, he took it. He did not avoid the Rose Bowl because he had lost there. He did not redesign his program to circumvent the conference championship path that led there. He kept winning the Big Ten, kept earning the trip to Pasadena, and kept losing. There is something about that stubborn consistency, the willingness to keep trying the same road even when the road had not been kind. That is very Bo. He did not change what he believed because of what had happened. He believed what he believed and the results would take care of themselves. Now let us talk about some of the men who played for him. Anthony Carter. He came to Michigan from Riviera Beach, Florida in 1979. He was a wide receiver with speed so exceptional that defensive backs who were themselves elite athletes simply could not stay with him. He was not physically large, he played at roughly 160 pounds, but on a football field he was one of the most dangerous players in the country. In 1980, Carter caught the pass from John Wangler that defeated Indiana as time expired, a play so celebrated in Michigan lore that it is still replayed, still discussed, still held up as the kind of moment that makes a fan base understand why they spend their Saturdays the way they spend them. Indiana had been about to win. And then Carter was in the end zone. The game was over. Michigan had survived. He was a 3-time All-American. He finished 4th in the Heisman voting in 1982. He went on to a professional career with the Minnesota Vikings that confirmed everything Michigan fans had already known, that Carter was and always had been a special talent. There were other players in the Schembechler years who deserve naming. Cornerback and kick returner Butch Woolfolk. Running back Rob Lytle, who finished 2nd in the Heisman in 1976 and was one of the most complete backs in the Big Ten. Quarterback Rick Leach, who ran Schembechler's option offense with an efficiency that fit the system perfectly. Offensive linemen who left for the NFL with the reputation of being among the best prepared players at their position in the draft. The Bo Schembechler offensive lineman brand was real and it was recognized by NFL scouts for decades. The 1980 team went 10-2 and beat Washington in the Rose Bowl, one of Schembechler's few Pasadena victories, and one that meant something because it came after years of frustration. The 1985 team finished 6-6, which was by Schembechler's standards a failure, but which produced in Jim Harbaugh a quarterback who would spend the next 30 years trying to live up to what he had learned in Ann Arbor. The 1989 team, Schembechler's last, went 10-2, won the Big Ten and beat USC in the Rose Bowl. It was the perfect final act for a man who had defined the program for 21 years. He retired following that season, transitioned to athletic director, and lived in Ann Arbor until the November morning in 2006 when he died. His former players went everywhere. They became coaches, businessmen, educators, community leaders. They formed what might be the most extensive informal alumni network in college football. The men who had played for Bo, who carried that experience with them, who called each other in times of crisis and in times of celebration and who never quite let go of what it had meant to be in that locker room. They still gather. They still talk about him. They still invoke the phrase, the team, the team, the team. After Schembechler came Gary Moeller, and after Moeller's arrest in 1995 came Lloyd Carr, and it is worth spending real time on Carr, because his 13 seasons at Michigan produced more than a national championship and 5 Big Ten titles. They produced some of the finest individual players and most memorable seasons in the program's modern history, and Carr himself was a figure of quiet dignity who never quite received the credit he deserved. Carr did not look like a football coach the way Schembechler looked like a football coach. He was measured where Schembechler was explosive. He was careful where Schembechler was instinctive. He spoke in full sentences with no wasted words, and when he was angry the temperature in the room dropped rather than rose. But he could coach, he could recruit, and he cared about his players in a way that extended well beyond their eligibility. His first full season was 1995. He went 9-4. The following year, 10-2. And then 1997, 12-0, national champions. We have already told that story. But the players on that team deserve more than a headline. Charles Woodson was the most famous. But the 1997 team was a collective achievement, built on an offensive line that was dominant for an entire season, on a defense that forced opponents into mistakes, and on a quarterback named Brian Griese who was efficient and unflappable and who completed 60% of his passes in the Rose Bowl when it mattered most. Brian Griese, the son of Bob Griese, the Hall of Fame quarterback who had played for Purdue and gone on to lead the Miami Dolphins to back-to-back Super Bowls in the 1970s. Brian Griese came to Michigan as a walk-on, not recruited, not offered a scholarship, just a kid who showed up and asked for a chance. He became the starter, won the national championship, and was drafted by the Denver Broncos, where he won a Super Bowl ring as a backup in 1998 and later became a successful NFL starter. A walk-on. National champion. It is the kind of story that programs put in recruiting brochures, and in this case it was entirely true. The 1998 season brought a 10-3 record and a Citrus Bowl victory. The 1999 season, 10-2. In 2000, Michigan went 9-3. And in the early 2000s, Carr built teams that were consistently excellent without reaching the championship level. Good enough to win Big Ten titles, not quite good enough to break through nationally. 2 players from this era deserve extended mention. Chris Perry, a running back from Flint, Michigan, who played from 2000 to 2003. He finished his career as one of the most productive runners in program history, with nearly 3,000 career rushing yards. In 2003, his senior season, he won the Doak Walker Award as the nation's best running back. He rushed for over 1,000 yards, caught passes out of the backfield with the comfort of a receiver, and gave Michigan an offensive identity in seasons when the passing game was inconsistent. Braylon Edwards, a wide receiver from Detroit who played from 2001 to 2004. He was, in many people's assessment, the best wide receiver in Michigan history. In 2004, his senior season, he caught 97 passes for 1,330 yards and 15 touchdowns. He won the Biletnikoff Award as the nation's best receiver. He was named a consensus All-American. He was selected 3rd overall in the 2005 NFL Draft. Edwards was not just a statistic accumulator. He was a player who made difficult catches look effortless and who competed with an edge that reminded Michigan fans of what they had seen in Desmond Howard a decade earlier. A receiver who wanted the ball in the biggest moments and who almost always did something useful with it when he got it. Carr's final years were complicated. The program began to feel like it was aging. The 2005 season brought a 9-3 record but a loss to Nebraska in the Alamo Bowl that felt like a step backward. The 2006 season brought the game of the century against Ohio State. Number 1 versus number 2, Bo dying that morning, the Buckeyes winning 42-39, and then a loss to USC in the Rose Bowl. And then 2007, the Appalachian State game, which we have already covered, and which does not get easier to discuss with repetition. Carr retired after that season. His final game was a Capital One Bowl against Florida on January 1, 2008. Florida won 41-35. It was an end that did not match the dignity of what Carr had built over 13 years, and the program has never quite known how to square that final image with everything that came before it. What came before it was real. 5 Big Ten titles. A national championship. Players who left better than they arrived. A program run with integrity and seriousness and genuine care for the people in it. Lloyd Carr deserves to be remembered for all of that, not just for the final 2 years. The bowl game history of Michigan football is, by itself, a story worth telling at length. It begins on January 1, 1902, in Pasadena, at a tournament called the Tournament East-West Football Game, what would become in subsequent years the Rose Bowl. Michigan was the only team willing to make the trip from the Midwest to California. Stanford agreed to play them. Michigan won 49-0. Yost's point-a-minute offense ran wild against a Stanford team that had no preparation for what it was seeing. The game was so lopsided that the Rose Bowl organizers decided not to host another football game for 14 years, preferring instead the more predictable spectacle of chariot races and other Tournament of Roses activities. Michigan had participated in the first college bowl game ever played, and they had won it by 49 points. The Rose Bowl eventually resumed in 1916, and Michigan's relationship with it became one of the defining threads of the program's postseason history. The Big Ten Pac-10 agreement, which sent the Big Ten champion to Pasadena every year, meant that Michigan's route to the most prestigious bowl game in college football ran directly through the conference championship. Over the decades, Michigan won the Rose Bowl in 1948, sending the program to its first national championship under Fritz Chrysler. They won it again in 1951, again in 1965, again in 1981 under Schembechler. They won it in 1993 under Moeller and in 1998 under Carr, that victory over Washington State completing the national championship run. But they also lost it, painfully, repeatedly. Schembechler's 5 losses in Pasadena haunt the record in a way that his 13 Big Ten titles cannot fully erase. There were Rose Bowl losses to Washington, to USC, to Arizona. Each one a story of a program that was good enough to get there but could not close the deal on the first day of January. The 2007 Rose Bowl brought a loss to USC under Lloyd Carr, in what would prove to be one of his final bowl appearances. The score was 32-18. USC was dominant. It was a game that felt, in retrospect, like a passing of the torch, the old guard of Big Ten football giving way to a Pac-10 program that had spent the previous 5 years redefining what West Coast football could look like. The Sugar Bowl matters too. In January of 2012, Brady Hoke's first Michigan team defeated Virginia Tech 23-20 in a game that announced loudly that Michigan was back, that the Rodriguez years were truly over, that the program had found its footing, that whoever this new coach was, he could win in January. The feeling didn't last, but in the moment the Sugar Bowl felt like a new beginning. And then the Rose Bowl of January 1, 2024, the college football playoff semifinal, Michigan against Alabama. This was not just a bowl game. This was a statement. Alabama under Nick Saban, the most dominant program of the modern era, against Michigan in the most iconic setting in college football's postseason. Michigan won 27-20. Donovan Edwards ran for 2 touchdowns. The defense held Jalen Milroe to a performance well below his season average. And Michigan moved on to the national championship game, where they would complete what that group of players had been building toward for 3 years. There is a bowl game moment that has not been mentioned yet and that belongs in any complete telling of Michigan's postseason history. January 1, 2008. The Capital One Bowl. Orlando, Florida. Lloyd Carr's final game as Michigan's head coach. Michigan played Florida. Urban Meyer's Florida Gators, who had won the national championship the previous season and who came into this game as one of the most talented rosters in college football. Tim Tebow at quarterback. Percy Harvin at receiver. A defense that was fast and physical and completely different in style and personnel from anything Michigan had faced all season. Michigan played them to the final whistle. The score was 35-41. Florida won. But Michigan scored 35 points against a national champion, competed in every quarter, and left the field with the kind of performance that might have extended Carr's tenure if that had been the direction things were heading. It wasn't. Carr had already decided to retire. The loss to Appalachian State earlier in the season had not caused that decision, but it had perhaps confirmed that an era was ending regardless of what happened in any bowl game. The final image of Lloyd Carr as Michigan's head coach, standing on the sideline in Orlando, outmatched in talent but not in effort or preparation, watching his players give everything they had in a losing cause, is an image that captures something essential about his 13 years. He did not win every game. He did not always have the most talent. But his teams competed, every Saturday, in a way that reflected genuine preparation and genuine belief. Carr was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2011. The honor was deserved and overdue. And there is one more Rose Bowl story that deserves its place in this history, because it occurred at a moment when Michigan needed it most. January 1, 1993. Michigan versus Washington. Gary Moeller was the coach. It was his 3rd season and he had won the Big Ten championship. Washington, under Don James, was one of the premier programs in the country and had beaten Michigan in a previous Rose Bowl. The game was played before a sellout crowd in Pasadena and was broadcast nationally to a massive audience. Michigan won 38-31 in a performance that announced Moeller as a head coach who could win the biggest games. Elvis Grbac was the quarterback. Desmond Howard, who had won the Heisman the previous year, was in the NFL by this point. The program was not riding a single transcendent player, it was playing disciplined, complete Michigan football on both sides of the ball and winning because it was better. That Rose Bowl victory was the peak of Moeller's tenure. He would win 9 games in 1993, 8 in 1994, before the arrest that ended his run. But in January of 1993, for one afternoon in Pasadena, Michigan under Gary Moeller was everything the program had trained itself to be. The Rose Bowl. 49-0 in 1902. Won in 1948, 1951, 1965, 1981, 1993, 1998. Lost in years that still hurt in Ann Arbor. A complicated, generation-long argument between a program and a stadium about what happens when the Big Ten champion goes west to play the Pac-10 champion on New Year's Day. Michigan's record there is not perfect. No program's record anywhere is perfect. But the Rose Bowl is where Michigan football has gone, more than almost any other program in history, to prove what it is. To test itself against the best the other side of the country can offer. To find out, in the sunshine of a January afternoon in California, whether what they built in the cold and the gray of a Michigan autumn was real. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it wasn't. That is the Rose Bowl. That is what it has always been. There are chapters in Michigan's bowl history and Schembechler era that we have touched but not fully entered. Let us go back and do that now, because the details are where the soul of this program lives. The 1969 season did not end with the win over Ohio State. It ended with a Rose Bowl loss to USC, 17-10. Schembechler's first team, the one that had just shocked the college football world by beating Hayes' best team, went to Pasadena and lost. And Schembechler, on the eve of that game, suffered a heart attack. He was in the hospital when his team took the field. His assistants ran the game. Michigan lost. He recovered. He came back. He built the 1970 team around revenge. Ohio State had revenge on their minds too, and they won that November game 20-9, but the broader point was that Schembechler had survived. He had stood at the edge of mortality and come back to the practice field, which was, for him, the natural order of things. Over the next 2 decades, his teams would win in ways that were often beautiful in their simplicity. They would line up, run the ball, play defense, kick field goals when needed, and not apologize for any of it. In an era when the forward pass was becoming increasingly central to college football's evolution, Schembechler ran the ball. He ran it because he believed in it, because his offensive linemen could execute it, and because he had seen, year after year, that a team that can run the ball in the fourth quarter of a November game in the Big Ten is a team that wins. The 1976 season, Michigan went 10-2, won the Big Ten, went to the Rose Bowl. They lost to USC 18-14 in a game that came down to a final drive. One of 5 Rose Bowl losses that would define the complicated postseason chapter of Schembechler's legacy. The 1978 season, Michigan went 10-2 again. Rick Leach was the quarterback. He had been the starter since 1975, 4 seasons as Michigan's starting quarterback, which gave him a continuity with the program that was unusual and that produced, across those 4 years, some of the most efficient execution of Schembechler's option-based offense that the program had seen. The 1981 season brought one of the genuine Rose Bowl highlights of the Schembechler era. Michigan defeated Washington 23-6. The Wolverines were dominant. Anthony Carter had a brilliant game. And for Schembechler, it was proof that the Rose Bowl losses were circumstantial rather than structural, that his teams could win in Pasadena when everything aligned correctly. What Schembechler gave Michigan across 21 seasons was not just wins, was a model. A way of building a program that did not depend on a single exceptional player, that was not disrupted by the graduation of a great class, that reproduced itself year after year because the system was sound and the culture was strong. When he left, the people he had trained carried that model with them. Gary Moeller had been his assistant. Lloyd Carr had been his assistant. Les Miles, who won a national championship at LSU, had played for Schembechler and coached on his staff. Brady Hoke had worked in the Michigan system. Jim Harbaugh had played for him. The reach of what Schembechler built extended far beyond Ann Arbor, into programs across the country, into NFL franchises, into the coaching trees of coaches who had never set foot in Michigan Stadium but who had learned from someone who had learned from Bo. The 1964 season deserves its own moment, because it belongs to a man who has been largely absent from this story so far. Bump Elliott. He coached Michigan from 1959 to 1968. He was the brother of Pete Elliott, who was simultaneously coaching Illinois, making them the only brothers to coach Big Ten programs at the same time. A trivia fact that is genuinely interesting and that speaks to the culture of Midwestern football in the early 1960s, when coaching bloodlines were tight and the conference was a world unto itself. In 1964, Elliott's Michigan team won the Big Ten championship, their first since 1950. They finished 9-1, ranked 4th nationally, and won the Rose Bowl over Oregon State 12-7. It was the best season of Elliott's tenure and one of the better seasons in the program's mid-century history. The star of that 1964 team was a halfback named Bob Timberlake, who won the Big Ten MVP, and a defense that held opponents to single digits in several games. The program was not yet what it would become under Schembechler, was not yet the dominant force in the conference that the late 1960s and 1970s would make it, but the 1964 team was legitimately excellent and gave Michigan fans a season worth remembering during a decade that ended badly. Elliott resigned after the 1968 loss to Ohio State, the 50-14 game, the humiliation that ushered Schembechler in, and transitioned to associate athletic director. He had been, by most accounts, a decent and principled man who ran a clean program and who was ultimately done in by an Ohio State team that was one of the best in the country and by the structural disadvantage of not having Bo Schembechler on his staff anymore. He deserves his place in the lineage. In the decades since Schembechler, the program's identity has been shaped not just by what happened on the field but by something harder to quantify, the culture of expectation that surrounds Michigan football and that influences every decision the program makes, from who it hires to how it recruits to how it responds when things go wrong. That culture has produced remarkable things. It produced the 2021 win in Columbus after a decade of losses, a win that meant something beyond the box score precisely because the expectation had never wavered even when the results had. It produced J.J. McCarthy playing 27 games and losing 1, in a program that demands that level of performance as the baseline rather than celebrating it as exceptional. And that culture has also, at times, been the program's most difficult challenge. When Rich Rodriguez arrived in 2008, the culture was the problem. Not his offense, not his talent evaluation, not his work ethic, the culture. Michigan football had a self-image that Rodriguez's approach did not fit, and the program spent 3 years in a kind of civil war between what it had always been and what it was being asked to become. The resolution, Brady Hoke, Michigan Man Sugar Bowl winner in year 1, felt like a restoration. And then the restoration failed because the culture of expectation, as sustaining as it can be, does not by itself win football games against good teams in November. What the best Michigan coaches have understood, what Schembechler understood most clearly of all, is that the culture is an asset only when it is backed by the unglamorous work that makes winning possible. The recruiting, the conditioning, the film study, the blocking assignments, the 4th-and-1 sneak when the game is on the line and you do not have a clever play designed for it, you just have an offensive line that will not be moved. The culture of expectation is real. It fills 100,000 seats every Saturday. It generates the kind of alumni passion and donor support that funds facilities and recruiting budgets. It attracts players who want to be part of something that matters beyond their individual career. But it has to be earned. Every year. By every team. Against every opponent. That is what Kyle Whittingham is building in 2026. Not the culture, that is already there, embedded in the stadium and the helmet and the fight song. What he is building is the foundation underneath it. The unglamorous part. The part that does not get discussed in the first week of preseason coverage but that determines, by November, whether the culture is being honored or merely invoked. He has done it before. In Salt Lake City, with a fraction of the resources, against competition that did not give him easy wins. He built it there from the ground up, year by year, until Utah was a program that the conference respected and opposing coaches prepared for with genuine concern. In Ann Arbor, with Bryce Underwood taking snaps and a roster that was competitive even through the chaos of the past 2 years, he has more to work with than he has ever had. The question is not whether the standard is there. It has always been there. The question is whether this version of the team, this collection of 19 and 20-year-olds in the winged helmet in the fall of 2026, can rise to meet it. Everything in this history, the 550 points in 1901, the Mad Magicians of 1947, the 10-year war, the Heisman trophies, the national championships, the 100,000 people every Saturday for 50 years, everything points toward that question being answered. Not definitively, not permanently. Football does not work that way. But answered for this season, for this team. in the way that every Michigan team has answered it, or tried to, or been defined by the trying. That is the tradition. That is what it means to put on the winged helmet and run through the tunnel at Michigan Stadium and hear that sound. Every team inherits it. Every team is responsible for it. Every team, in the end, becomes part of it, wins and losses and scandals and championships and all. That is Michigan football. That is what it has always been. 41 bowl games in program history. A record that spans more than a century and includes the very first bowl game ever played. That is Michigan's bowl legacy. Complicated, sometimes heartbreaking, occasionally transcendent, always significant. There is one more chapter in Michigan's playing history that has not received the treatment it deserves in this telling. The 1990s under Lloyd Carr were about more than Charles Woodson and the 1997 national championship. And the 1980s under Schembechler produced players and moments that deserve more than a passing mention. Let us go back to 1980 and the play that Michigan fans of a certain generation will tell you was the moment they became Michigan fans, or the moment that confirmed everything they already believed about what Michigan football could be. Anthony Carter. October 25, 1980. Michigan versus Indiana. Michigan was losing. With no time on the clock, John Wangler threw a desperation pass to the back of the end zone. Carter, who had run a route that took him to the corner of the field, went up for it. Made the catch. Michigan won 27-21. The call on the radio, a single sustained note of disbelief from broadcaster Bob Ufer, who had been calling Michigan games since the 1940s and who loved this program with a fervor that made normal sports broadcasting seem like mere journalism, became one of the famous moments in Michigan football media history. Ufer's voice broke. He was not pretending. He genuinely could not contain what he was feeling. That is Anthony Carter. That is one play. In a career full of plays like it, he was a three-time All-American. He left Michigan having rewritten the receiving records. He went to the Minnesota Vikings in the 1985 NFL Draft and played 9 professional seasons, making the Pro Bowl in 1987 after one of the most productive receiving seasons in Vikings history. And then there was Jim Harbaugh as a player. He played at Michigan from 1983 to 1986, the starting quarterback for the final 2 seasons. In 1986, he guaranteed a victory over Ohio State before the game, a statement that made the news that caused people in Ann Arbor to worry about whether the quarterback had overstepped, and then went out and delivered on it. Michigan won 26-24. Harbaugh passed for 847 yards in his senior season and left as one of the most productive passers in program history at that point. He was drafted in the first round by the Chicago Bears. He played 15 years in the NFL. He went back to Michigan. He won a national championship. He left. The arc of Jim Harbaugh's relationship with Michigan football, player, rebel, local hero, head coach, national champion, departure, is one of the stranger and more compelling personal narratives the program has produced. He loved Michigan in the way that only complicated relationships produce love. Intensely, imperfectly, with a quality of need on both sides. In 1988, the final year of the Schembechler era produced a Big Ten co-championship and a Rose Bowl appearance. Michigan lost the Rose Bowl to USC 22-14. Another January loss in Pasadena, another near miss, another season defined by what it almost was. And then 1989, the final season. Michigan went 10-2, won the Big Ten outright, and beat USC in the Rose Bowl 17-10. Schembechler's final game as Michigan's coach was a victory. Not the ending the Rose Bowl record suggested he deserved, necessarily, but one he had earned nonetheless. The quiet detail of that final Rose Bowl is worth sitting with. Schembechler had gone to the Rose Bowl 10 times total in his career. He lost 6. He won 4. By any normal standard, a coach who wins 4 Rose Bowls has had an exceptional postseason record. In the context of his overall dominance, the losses have always received more attention. He did not seem to mind. Or if he minded, he did not let it change how he operated. He kept winning the Big Ten. He kept sending teams to Pasadena. He was Bo Schembechler and he was not going to redesign himself because Pasadena had been unkind. That stubbornness was both his greatest quality and, in the postseason, his limitation. He was who he was completely. No apologies. No adjustments born of self-doubt. Just football the way he understood it, applied as hard as he could apply it for as long as he could apply it. Lloyd Carr's program in the early 2000s produced something that has not been adequately recognized in this story, one of the great offensive players in Michigan history, playing in a system that was not particularly designed to make offensive players famous. Braylon Edwards. Let us spend more time here. Edwards grew up in Detroit. His father, Stan Edwards, had played running back at Michigan in the early 1980s, which meant that Braylon grew up watching Michigan games from the inside, not as a fan in the stands but as the son of a man who had worn the winged helmet. He had the expectation embedded in him before he ever set foot on a football field of his own. He came to Michigan in 2001. By his sophomore year, he was the best receiver in the Big Ten. By his junior year, he was one of the best receivers in the country. By his senior year, he was playing at a level that his opponents simply could not match. In 2004, his final season, he caught 97 passes. 97. In a run-first offense that was not built to feature a receiver as a primary weapon, against Big Ten defenses that knew he was the most dangerous player on the field and prepared accordingly, he caught 97 passes for more than 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. The Biletnikoff Award, given to the nation's best receiver, went to him without serious debate. What made Edwards exceptional was not just the statistics. It was the competitiveness. He did not disappear in big games. He did not come off the field quietly when the defense had adjusted to take him away. He competed on every route, contested every ball, and made the catches that less gifted receivers do not make. The ones in traffic over the middle at the back of the end zone with a corner breathing on him. He was selected 3rd overall in the 2005 draft, behind Alex Smith and Ronnie Brown. He played for the Cleveland Browns, made the Pro Bowl in 2007, and had a professional career that, while complicated by off-field issues, confirmed the talent that Michigan fans had watched for 4 years. Edwards was the last of the great Carr-era skill players. The end of a line that ran from Desmond Howard through Tyrone Wheatley through a series of receivers and backs who gave Michigan's offense its intermittent brilliance during the Carr years. After Edwards left, the program spent several seasons trying to find the next version of him and not quite finding it. The Rodriguez era produced Denard Robinson's running ability but not a consistent passing game. The Hoke era produced flashes but no sustained offensive identity. It was not until Harbaugh arrived, and then until J.J. McCarthy and the offensive infrastructure that surrounded the 2021 to 2023 teams, that Michigan found again the combination of talent and system that made the offense a genuine weapon rather than a mechanism for managing games. The Heisman Trophy at Michigan deserves one more pass before we move forward, because 3 winners across 7 decades tells you something important about what kind of program Michigan is and what kind of players it attracts. Tom Harmon in 1940. A multi-position player who did everything on the field and then went and did things off it that most people only read about. He was, by the accounts of everyone who knew him, as good a man as he was a player. Desmond Howard in 1991. The greatest individual season by a receiver or return specialist in Michigan history, crowned by the most theatrical act of self-expression in the program's history. He did not win the Heisman by accumulating statistics in a favorable system. He won it by being, on the biggest stage, the most electric player in college football. Charles Woodson in 1997. The only defensive player in history. From Ohio. Who chose Michigan. Who proved, in every game that mattered, that he was the best player on the field regardless of which side of the ball was on. 3 Heismans. 3 different kinds of football players. 3 different eras. What they share, and what the Heisman voters in each case recognized, is a quality that goes beyond talent. A quality that makes other talented people seem smaller by comparison. A presence. Michigan does not always have that player. No program always has that player. But when Michigan has had it, they have produced men who held the trophy and who, more importantly, went on to lives that were worthy of everything the trophy is supposed to represent. Harmon and the Silver Star. Howard and the Super Bowl MVP. Woodson and the Hall of Fame. 3 trophies. 3 men. A complete argument for what Michigan football at its best produces. The 10-year war produced moments that stand alone in the sport's history. None stranger or more painful than November of 1973. Michigan and Ohio State were both undefeated heading into the season-ending game. Ohio State was ranked first. Michigan was ranked 4th. They played to a 10-10 tie. A 10-10 tie with Michigan kicker Mike Lantry missing 2 late field goals that would have won it. A tie. In a game that decided the Big Ten's Rose Bowl representative. Here is where it gets extraordinary. The Big Ten Conference did not simply go by standings. In the event of a tie, a faculty athletic committee voted on which team would go to the Rose Bowl. And that committee, by a 6-4 vote, sent Ohio State. 6-4. A committee vote, deciding who went to the Rose Bowl. The bitterness that generated in Ann Arbor festered for years. Michigan felt robbed, not of a win but of a fair process. That 10-10 tie, and the vote that followed, became one of the founding grievances of the Michigan fan base. A story told and retold, a wound that never fully healed because it felt not like losing but like being taken from. And the following year, 1974, Michigan and Ohio State tied again. This time there was no question. Ohio State went to the Rose Bowl. Michigan stayed home. They were, again, undefeated. The cruelty of this game. The particular, specific cruelty of being undefeated and watching someone else go. That is a Michigan story. That pain, that grievance, that sense that greatness is never quite enough because someone, somewhere, will find a way to take it from you, that is part of the texture of what it means to follow this program. Now let us talk about what the rivalry with Ohio State becomes when it is at its absolute most human. In November of 2006, Schembechler died. He had suffered his first heart attack on the night before the 1970 Rose Bowl, had coached his team to the game, won the right to go to Pasadena, and then collapsed in his hotel room the night before the game. He survived. He coached for 19 more years. He died on November 17, 2006, the morning of the Ohio State game. The game that day had been called by the media the game of the century. Ohio State was number 1 in the country. Michigan was number 2. Both teams were undefeated. The crowd at Ohio Stadium was a record 105,708. The national television audience was estimated at 21 million people, the largest regular season college football broadcast in 13 years. Schembechler died that morning. Ohio State won 42-39. And somehow, in the grief and the pain and the loss of that weekend, the game felt secondary. The scoreboard felt secondary. What mattered was that the most important figure in the program's modern history had left on the day of its biggest game. Had gone on his own terms in the only way Bo Schembechler could have been expected to go, surrounded by football. The team played, because you always play the Ohio State game. Because the team is bigger than any individual, even the individual who taught you that the team was bigger than any individual. They lost. 42-39. It was a heartbreaking loss in a game they might have won. But they played. And in playing it, in honoring Bo by doing exactly what Bo would have told them to do, they told you everything you need to know about what Michigan football is at its core. Gary Moeller took over from Schembechler in 1990. He was a Schembechler disciple, a Michigan man in the truest sense of that phrase. Someone who had played under him and coached under him and absorbed the philosophy completely. He went 44-13 in 3 and 5 seasons. He won 3 Big Ten titles. He was, by any measure, running an excellent football program. And then, in 1995, he was arrested on a disorderly conduct charge at a Southfield, Michigan restaurant. The incident was embarrassing and public. Moeller was asked to step down. Lloyd Carr took over. He was another member of the lineage. In his 3rd season, 1997, he won a national championship. Sort of. Michigan finished 12-0. They beat Ohio State. They won the Big Ten title. They went to the Rose Bowl and beat Washington State 21-16, with Ryan Leaf at quarterback for the Cougars. They finished ranked number 1 in the AP poll. Nebraska also finished undefeated. Nebraska won the Orange Bowl. Nebraska finished ranked number 1 in the coaches poll. 2 undefeated teams. 2 different champions. A split title. Michigan celebrated. Nebraska celebrated. And everyone else watched and said, "We cannot do this again. We cannot have the national championship determined by 2 different polls picking 2 different teams." The 1997 split championship is widely credited as a primary driver for the creation of the Bowl Championship Series, the BCS, which attempted, imperfectly and with enormous controversy, to ensure that the top 2 teams in the country played each other. The BCS begot the 4-team college football playoff. The 4-team playoff has since expanded. In other words, Michigan's last pre-2023 championship helped change the structure of college football's entire postseason. Not because Michigan did anything wrong, they won every game they played, but because the system couldn't handle their perfection gracefully. Carr also won 5 Big Ten titles in 13 years. He retired after the 2007 season with his dignity intact and his record unblemished by anything except competitive football. What came next was not so clean. Rich Rodriguez. The name carries a particular weight in Ann Arbor. Not exactly shame, not exactly anger, something more like discomfort. The memory of a mismatch so profound that the program had to look itself in the mirror and ask some hard questions about what it actually valued. Rodriguez came from West Virginia, where he had built one of the most exciting programs in college football. 3 consecutive 10 or 11 win seasons. The spread offense, run with creativity and intelligence, exploiting mismatches that traditional Big Ten defenses weren't designed to stop. Michigan went after him. They wanted the spread. They wanted offense. They wanted, consciously or not, something different from what Schembechler had established, something modern, something that would shake off the dust. His introductory press conference was interrupted by reports that West Virginia was suing him for breach of contract. In his first season, Michigan went 3-9. They lost to Toledo at home. They had not lost to Toledo in 60 years. They had not gone 3-9 in the history of the program. Rodriguez ran a spread offense in a program that considered itself the birthplace of power football. He was not a Michigan man. He had no ties to the university, no lineage, no relationship with the culture Schembechler had built. Some of the boosters and administrators made no secret of their skepticism. Key assistants he had planned to bring from West Virginia were unable to follow. The foundation of what he was trying to build kept shifting beneath him. He went 3-9, then 5-7, then 7-6. He was fired after the 2010 season with a record of 15-22. 15-22. In 3 years. At Michigan. The program that had won more games than any other program in college football history had spent 3 years losing more than it won. The gap between what Michigan believed itself to be and what it was in those 3 years was the widest in the program's history. And that gap, that chasm between expectation and reality, is one of the defining experiences of being a Michigan fan. You feel it in your gut. You feel it every time someone from Ohio State smirks at you. You feel it in conversations about your program's history where you have to skip quickly past those 3 years. Brady Hoke replaced Rodriguez in 2011. He was a Michigan man. He had played at Ball State but had been an assistant at Michigan. He was warm and genuine and clearly loved the program. His first year was magnificent. 11-2 with wins over Notre Dame and Ohio State and a Sugar Bowl victory over Virginia Tech. The nightmare was over. They were back. They were not back. Hoke went 8-5, then 7-6. In 2014 they went 5-7 and missed a bowl game entirely. And in September of 2014, a quarterback named Shane Morris took a hit that left him clearly concussed and was allowed back onto the field. The school later apologized for what they called confusion and a lack of communication. They changed their concussion protocols. The image that stayed, of a young man staggering back to the huddle while the sideline watched, became a symbol of a program that had lost its way in more ways than one. Hoke was fired at the end of the season. And then Michigan went and hired the biggest name they could find. Jim Harbaugh, the son of a Michigan assistant, a Michigan quarterback himself in the mid-1980s, a man who had gone on to a long NFL career and NFL coaching career, and had taken San Francisco to the Super Bowl in 2013. He was the most decorated college football coaching hire in years, and when he was announced as Michigan's head coach in December of 2014, the reaction was not cautious hope, it was explosion. This was the hire. The one that would end the Rodriguez years and the Hoke years and restore the program to what it had always been. Harbaugh was eccentric. He wore khakis always. He ate cereal dry famously. He went to bed at 9 o'clock. He spoke in ways that were alternately inspiring and mystifying. He went to bed at 9 and woke before dawn. He was intense in the way that only certain competitors are intense, the way that bleeds out of the sport and into every other corner of a life. And in his first 6 years he won consistently. Went 10-3. Went 10-3 again. Reached the college football playoff. Built a team that was close to great without being great. But against Ohio State he was 0 for 5. It is hard to overstate how much that hurt. Schembechler had held a winning record in the rivalry. Carr had gone roughly even. The very first thing Michigan fans asked about any new coach was, can he beat Ohio State? Because what had happened in the 2000s and 2010s, what had happened in 2018 when Ohio State won 62-39, a score that caused grown adults to cry in Ann Arbor, had become a generational wound. Harbaugh's inability to beat the Buckeyes fed a narrative that questioned everything else he had done. And then, 2021. Michigan won in Columbus. 42-27. Their first win in Ohio Stadium since 2000. The reaction from Michigan fans was, there is no polite way to say this, disproportionate to a regular season football game. People wept. Grown adults posted videos of themselves in cars, in parking lots, in living rooms, barely able to speak. There were celebrations that went until dawn in Ann Arbor. The win was not just a win. It was the release of something that had been building for 20 years. Michigan won again in 2022, 45-23. And again in 2023, 30-24. 3 straight. 3 Big Ten titles. And then the national championship. The drought was over. The Ohio State curse, if that's what it was broken. And then Harbaugh left for the Chargers. Just like that. Took the national championship, raised his fists in the confetti at NRG Stadium, shook some hands, and took the Los Angeles Chargers job in January 2024. Michigan fans had complicated feelings about this. He had given them the championship. He had also walked out the door essentially the moment after winning it. The man who had talked most about the Michigan brand, the Michigan identity, the weight of the winged helmet, he chose the NFL over Ann Arbor at the first opportunity. He always said he wanted to coach in the NFL again. He had said it clearly and without apology. Whether that made his departure easier to accept is a matter of individual temperament. What is certain is that he left, and he left quickly, and he left his offensive lineman turned assistant turned interim turned head coach Sharon Moore holding the most complicated bag in college football. Before we follow Sharon Moore's arc to its dark conclusion, we need to go back and spend proper time with the men who made Michigan football what it is at its best. Because this history, this rich, complicated, magnificent history, has names in it that deserve more than a line or a statistic. Names like Desmond Howard. He came from Cleveland, Ohio. He played at Michigan from 1989 to 1991. He was a wide receiver and return specialist with a combination of quickness and body control that made defensive coordinators look old and slow. In 1991, playing against Ohio State in the annual season finale, Michigan was driving late in the game, needing something spectacular. Desmond Howard caught a punt. He caught a punt at his own 3-yard line, made 2 cuts that eliminated 3 would-be tacklers, and ran 93 yards for a touchdown. The longest punt return in Michigan history. And at the end zone, spontaneously, impulsively, completely without planning, he stopped. He stood still. He extended one arm straight, tucked the football, raised his left leg. He struck the pose that every college football fan in America recognized instantly, the Heisman Trophy stance. In that moment, in the Ohio State end zone, he made an argument for the Heisman so visually perfect that the voters could not ignore it. He said afterward that he was wrestling with what to do as he approached the end zone. He was in the moment, the whole game suddenly compressed into that single, electric instant, and he said to himself, "Forget it." And he did. He struck the pose. He won the Heisman that year by a margin that was almost embarrassingly large. He captured 85% of the available first-place votes. He had caught 61 passes for 950 yards and 19 touchdowns, rushed for 2 more scores, and returned punts and kicks for 634 more yards. Gary Moeller, his coach, said afterward that he would have preferred Howard to simply hand the ball to the official after the touchdown, Barry Sanders style, act like you've been there 100 times. But Moeller also said, honestly and with grace, that given how badly Howard wanted to beat Ohio State, given the weight of that game, he had to let it go. Howard scored 37 touchdowns at Michigan. He went on to an NFL career that included a Super Bowl MVP, the most memorable performance by a return specialist in Super Bowl history, with 353 return yards and a 99-yard kickoff return that effectively ended the game. The Heisman pose. The end zone celebration. The Ohio State game. It is one of the great moments in Michigan football history, and it belongs entirely to Desmond Howard. And then, 6 years later in 1997, something happened that hadn't happened before and hasn't happened since. A defensive player won the Heisman Trophy. His name was Charles Woodson. He was from Fremont, Ohio. He chose Michigan. Every Ohio State game was, for him, a referendum on that choice. Every Ohio State game was a chance to prove, to the home state fans who considered him a traitor, that he had chosen correctly. In 1997, Woodson was not just Michigan's best player. He was arguably the best player in college football. He played cornerback primarily, but his coaches used him everywhere. They threw him passes. They sent him on punt returns. They asked him to do things that nobody asked cornerbacks to do because cornerbacks weren't supposed to be able to do those things. He compiled 7 interceptions, 231 receiving yards, 283 punt return yards, and 4 total touchdowns. On a defense that held opponents to a fraction of what they normally produced. And in the Ohio State game, the game that made him the clear Heisman favorite, the game that settled the argument for the voters who still needed settling, he was extraordinary. He caught a 37-yard pass that set up Michigan's only offensive touchdown. He scored himself on a 78-yard punt return in the second quarter. And in the third quarter, with Ohio State threatening, Woodson intercepted a pass in the end zone. Keith Jackson, calling the game, said he could not recall a bigger single-game performance by a defensive player. Michigan won 20-14. Woodson won the Heisman, defeating Peyton Manning by 272 points. The Tennessee faithful never forgave it. They still bring it up. They note that Manning was completely left off 110 ballots, that 110 voters didn't place him first, second, or third. Here is what they tend not to mention. Woodson was also left off 88 ballots. And in every region of the country except the South, Woodson won the vote. He was the first defensive player to win the Heisman. He remains the only one. He was drafted 4th overall by the Oakland Raiders in 1998. He was the NFL's Defensive Rookie of the Year. He went on to an 18-year career that included an All-Pro season with the Packers and a Super Bowl ring. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 2018 and the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2021. Charles Woodson, from Fremont, Ohio, who chose Ann Arbor, who proved in every game that mattered most that the choice was right. Michigan's relationship with Ohio State is the defining rivalry in college football. There is an argument for it that goes back to their first meeting in 1897, which Michigan won 34-0, and that has never cooled, never receded, never become merely historical. ESPN once voted it the best sports rivalry in America. Not college football's best. All sports. The rivalry carries the peculiar weight of everything Ohio and Michigan represent culturally, the Ohio State fans who see Michigan fans as smug, legacy-obsessed, looking down their noses at a program that built its identity from nothing, and the Michigan fans who see Ohio State as, in the unimprovable phrasing of a Michigan running back in 2007, little brother. Mike Hart said it in the fall of 2007, after a Michigan win over Michigan State. He was talking about the Spartans in that moment. But the quote traveled, and somehow it became what Ohio State fans latched onto as well. The suggestion that their program was little brother to anyone. Ohio State has not taken it well. They have responded by winning football games. Let us look at the rivalry honestly. Michigan leads all time, 62 wins to 53 with 6 ties. But Ohio State has won 12 of the last 20 meetings heading into 2026. The Buckeyes went on a run in the 2000s and 2010s that tormented Michigan with a consistency that felt almost designed to humiliate. The 62-39 score in 2018. The years when Michigan would play well enough to win and then not win. The Snow Bowl of 1950. Michigan won 9-3 in a blizzard. Tony Momsen, whose older brother Bob played for the Buckeyes, blocked a punt and fell on it in the end zone. In the worst storm Columbus had seen in 37 years, 50,000 people showed up anyway. That is what this rivalry does to people. The pants tradition. If Ohio State beats Michigan, the players receive a gold charm in the shape of football pants. It dates to the 1934 game when Ohio State coach Francis Schmidt said Michigan was nothing special. They put their pants on one leg at a time just like anyone else. Ohio State won that game 34-0. A local businessman made the charms. They are engraved with the date and the score. Ohio State players have many of those charms. Michigan players have some of them too. And beyond the pants, beyond the rivalry as tradition and spectacle, there is this. The fact that on the morning of the biggest Ohio State game in decades in November of 2006, Bo Schembechler died. And Michigan played. That is what this rivalry demands. That is the weight it carries. It just keeps going. Year after year. First Saturday in November or the last. Michigan leads. Ohio State challenges. Something happens that neither side will ever stop arguing about. And then it happens again. The Paul Bunyan Trophy. Michigan and Michigan State play for a massive wooden carving of Paul Bunyan, 6 feet tall, painted half maize and blue and half green and white. Almost certainly the largest trophy in college football. Michigan leads the all-time series 75-38 with 5 ties. The intrastate rivalry carries a different weight than Ohio State, less national attention, more personal edge. Michigan fans consider themselves the big brother of Michigan football. Michigan State fans consider the very existence of that attitude to be evidence of why they despise Michigan. The 2015 game. The moment known simply as the punt snap. Michigan was leading 23-21 with 10 seconds left. Needing only to run out the clock, Michigan's punter received a botched snap. The ball bounced away. Michigan State's Jalen Watts-Jackson scooped it up and ran into the end zone as time expired. Michigan State 127-23. Bring up the words trouble with the snap to any Michigan fan over the age of 25 and watch what happens to their face. It is one of the most improbable endings in rivalry history. And the cruelty of it, the completeness of the improbability, is almost too much to be real. But it was real. It happened. And Michigan's fans have spent a decade absorbing it. These are the things a rivalry does to you. It gives you the Desmond Howard punt return and the Charles Woodson interception in the Ohio State end zone. And it takes the punt snap and the Mike Lantry field goals and the 6-4 faculty vote. It gives and it takes and it never lets you put it down. And then there is Notre Dame. Michigan's relationship with Notre Dame is one of the most storied in college football, and it comes with one of the great founding ironies in sports history. Notre Dame's very first football game was the day before Thanksgiving in 1887. The Michigan team traveled to South Bend that fall and, according to accounts of the day, taught the Notre Dame players the basic rules and rudiments of football in a practice session before the game. On a November field that was barely playable, Michigan won 8-0 when the game was called at halftime due to what the records describe as the first semi-officially recorded quagmire. Michigan literally taught Notre Dame how to play football. They have been trying to beat each other ever since. The all-time series record favors Michigan 25-17 with one tie. But the series has endured long hiatuses, scheduling disputes, conference complications, mutual recriminations. The final game of the modern era was played in September of 2014 in South Bend. Notre Dame won 31-0. Michigan was shut out. It was one of the worst days of the Brady Hoke era. The series is scheduled to resume in 2033 in Ann Arbor. There are Michigan fans alive today who will be in their 70s when it does. They will remember every game from every era of this rivalry. They will bring the weight of all of it to that first meeting in 19 years. That is what football does. It carries time. Let us step back now from the scoreboard and the rivalry and the coaching records, and spend time with the fight song. The Victors. Written in 1898. It is, by any reckoning, the most beloved college football fight song in America. If you have ever heard 100,000 people singing it in Michigan Stadium, you would not argue. Here is how it happened. November 24, 1898. Michigan traveled to Chicago to play Amos Alonzo Stagg's University of Chicago Maroons. A player named Charles Widman broke free on a 65-yard dash that sealed a 12-11 Michigan victory and the conference championship. Among the roughly 600 fans in attendance was a University of Michigan music student named Louis Elbel. He was so moved by what he had witnessed that, walking away from the stadium in the weakening winter light, he heard a melody in his head. He went to a relative's house. He began working on the song that night. He finished it on the train home to Ann Arbor. Hail to the victors valiant. Hail to the conquering heroes. The song briefly fell out of favor after Michigan left the Western Conference in 1907. The line champions of the West seemed inaccurate without the conference. But students revived it when Michigan rejoined in 1917. Since then, it has never been optional or occasional or nostalgic. It has been the sound of Michigan football, continuous and unchanging for more than 100 years. Gerald Ford, the 38th President of the United States, played football at Michigan. When he was in the White House, he requested the Victors played in place of Hail to the Chief at events. The Victors. Written in one night. Finished on a train. Sung ever since. Now let us talk about what happened after the confetti fell in Houston. Because the Michigan football story in the years between 2024 and 2026 is one of the more remarkable two-year swings the program has ever experienced. From the mountaintop to the lowest valley, in what felt like barely enough time to catch your breath. Harbaugh left. The sign-stealing investigation concluded. Sharon Moore was officially elevated to head coach. He had been the interim during Harbaugh's suspension and was promoted to permanent. He was likable and energetic and had the trust of the players who remained from the championship roster. In 2024, Moore's first full year, Michigan went 8-5, which, in most years at most programs, would be considered adequate. At Michigan, in the year after a national championship, it felt like a collapse. They beat Ohio State, improbably, in Columbus, a win that would come to look increasingly strange in retrospect, given that Ohio State went on to win the national championship that year. Michigan beat the eventual national champions, and still finished 8-5. There was a bowl win over Alabama. There was something to build on. But the NCAA's penalties were coming, and they came hard. The full scope of the sanctions hit the program during 2025. The fine was in the millions. Moore received an additional suspension. The program was being punished for the Stallions scandal, for the years of sign stealing, for the investigation that had shadowed the 2023 championship run. In Moore's second year, Michigan went 9-4. Reasonable. Even respectable. They beat Ohio State again at one point in the season. The game drew 18.4 million viewers, the most watched regular season matchup of 2025. But they lost to the Buckeyes in the final week of the regular season, the first Michigan-Ohio State loss since 2019. The Citrus Bowl against Texas was a 41-27 loss in which Texas scored 17 unanswered in the fourth quarter, including a 60-yard run by Arch Manning. And then, on December 10, 2025, Sherrone Moore was fired. And that same night he was arrested. The charges were home invasion, stalking, and breaking and entering. According to prosecutors, Moore entered the home of a woman he had been in a relationship with, took items from her kitchen, and threatened to harm himself. He was arraigned. His bond was set at $25,000. For Michigan fans, it was a moment of genuine shock. Not the competitive shock of a bad loss or a failed season, but the human shock of watching a man unravel publicly, in a way that was frightening and sad and deeply troubling. Whatever you thought of Sherrone Moore, the football coach, what happened in December of 2025 was a human story first. A man in crisis. A man who had taken on an enormous burden. The championship program, the scandal, the scrutiny, the impossible expectation, and had clearly been suffering in ways that no one around him had been able to address or absorb. The Michigan football program did not come out of 2025 looking good. The program was penalized. The coach was fired. The coach was then arrested. And a separate case involving former assistant Matthew Weiss, charged with hacking into the digital accounts of thousands of university students to steal intimate photos, remained in the legal system. These are not small things. And this history would not be honest if it treated them as small things. Michigan has a pattern. The pattern is, they achieve extraordinary things and then circumstances blow things apart at the worst possible moment. It is not unique to this program. Humans do this, institutions do this. But at Michigan, with the weight of expectation and the size of the stage, the explosions feel larger. Ferbert left for the Alaska Gold Rush. Moeller was arrested in a restaurant. Rodriguez was fired after 3 years of misery. The sign-stealing scandal shadowed the national championship. And now this. The question always is what comes next. What came next was Kyle Whittingham. 66 years old. Never spent a day of his professional coaching career east of the Mississippi. 21 years as the head coach at the University of Utah. A program he built from something good into something genuinely great. A program that won the Pac-12, that beat Alabama in the Sugar Bowl, that earned its place in the national conversation entirely through excellence and continuity and the kind of steady-handed program building that large programs with large alumni bases often cannot sustain. His career record at Utah was 177 wins and 88 losses. His bowl record was 11-6. He is regarded by coaches across the country as one of the best program builders of his era. Not the most celebrated, not the most famous, but one of the most effective. Michigan signed him to a 5-year deal worth $41 million, or $8.2 million per year. For a program that had just fired its coach and watched him be arrested the same night, it was a hire that said, "We are serious. We are not panicking. We are building." And the first thing Whittingham did was go find his quarterback, Bryce Underwood, the #1 recruit in the class of 2025. The 5-star quarterback from Belleville, Michigan, a hometown kid, who had shocked the recruiting world when he flipped his commitment from LSU to Michigan. He became the first #1 overall recruit to commit to Michigan since defensive lineman Rashawn Gary in 2016. The first 5-star quarterback since J.J. McCarthy. As a freshman in 2025, Underwood was raw. Brilliant flashes mixed with freshman mistakes. He broke the school's freshman passing record with 2,428 yards. He threw for 17 total touchdowns. He also threw 11 interceptions and completed 60.3% of his passes, a number that everyone acknowledged, including Underwood himself, needed to improve. When the coaching change happened, there was genuine uncertainty about whether Underwood would stay. The transfer portal is real. Quarterbacks leave. 5-star freshmen who feel like they're playing for a program in chaos have options. Underwood stayed. And Whittingham, in a statement that was both honest and optimistic, said what coaches rarely say about their starting quarterbacks with such directness. He's got so much ability, but he's raw. As you would expect an 18-year-old starting quarterback at a Power 4 school to be. He was not a completely finished product. And that's our job now. That is a coach talking. A coach who is comfortable enough with what he sees that he can be honest about what isn't there yet. A coach who doesn't need to oversell because he believes in the underlying talent. Underwood was voted a team captain for the spring and summer of 2026 by his teammates. A 19-year-old, voted captain by the men who work alongside him every day. That matters. That is not a publicity move. That is genuine respect from the people who see him up close. And Whittingham has a system. He builds from the run game. He builds defenses that are physical and assignment sound. He does not try to out-scheme everyone. He tries to out-prepare everyone, out-condition everyone, out-compete everyone. He has done it for 21 consecutive years against some of the best competition in college football. Michigan in 2026 is a program that has been through a scandal and a firing and an arrest and a coaching change, all within 3 years. That is a lot. But Michigan is also still Michigan. The largest stadium, the most wins in history, the winged helmet, the victors, the maize and blue on 100,000 bodies every Saturday in the fall. The platform is still there. What Whittingham now has to do is build something worthy of standing on it. There are other players in this history who deserve more than a passing mention. Men who carried the program through different chapters, who gave themselves to it completely and received back something that lasted their whole lives. Benny Friedman played at Michigan from 1924 to 1926. He was a quarterback in an era when passing was still considered a novelty, something you did when the running game failed you, not a primary weapon. Friedman disagreed. He believed the forward pass was the future of football, and he threw it with an accuracy and confidence that seemed decades ahead of his time. He formed what contemporaries called the Benny-to-Benny combination with receiver Benny Oesterbin. Yes, the same Oesterbin who would coach the 1948 national champions. Two players, different spellings of the same name, devastating opposing defenses in a way that foreshadowed what the sport would eventually become. Friedman was a two-time All-American. He won the Big Ten MVP in 1926. He went on to a Hall of Fame professional career and is regarded by historians as one of the genuine pioneers of the passing game. A man who was playing a style of football that the sport wouldn't fully embrace for another generation. Willie Heston, captain of the 1904 team. One of the great running backs of the point-a-minute era. He scored 93 touchdowns in 4 seasons at Michigan. 93. In an era when scoring was harder, the field was more chaotic, and the forward pass barely existed. He was the centerpiece of Yost's machine, the engine of the point-a-minute offense at its most punishing. Denard Robinson, Shoelace they called him for the perpetually untied laces that were his trademark, played for Michigan from 2009 to 2012. The Rodriguez and Hoke years. The difficult years. He was an electric dual-threat quarterback who gave Michigan fans something to celebrate during seasons when there was not much else to celebrate. He ran with a kind of improvisational joy that made people forget, briefly, the broader context of what the program was going through. In Ann Arbor, he is remembered with the particular warmth that fans reserve for players who made them feel good when feeling good was hard to come by. Aiden Hutchinson. He came to Michigan from Plymouth, a local kid who stayed home and built something extraordinary. He was part of the team that snapped the Ohio State losing streak in 2021. That year, as a senior defensive end, he had 14 sacks and was the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. He finished second in the Heisman voting, joining Tom Harmon and Bob Shapwiz as the only Michigan players to have finished in the runner-up position. He was the second overall pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Not the first overall. Not the headliner coming in. Second. And that distinction felt right for Hutchinson, a man who had been underestimated for most of his career and had quietly, repeatedly proven every skeptic wrong. NJJ McCarthy. 27 wins. 1 loss. As a starting quarterback at Michigan. He was not a flashy player. Wasn't Desmond Howard making a crowd stand up in Ohio Stadium? Wasn't Charles Woodson doing 4 different things on the same play? He was precise. He was competitive with an intensity that bordered on something fiercer than mere competitiveness. He was the quarterback of 3 straight wins over Ohio State, 3 straight Big Ten titles, and a national championship. His career stat line: 482 completions on 713 attempts, 67.6%, 6,226 yards, 49 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 10 rushing touchdowns, 1 loss. What that line doesn't capture is the thing that made him who he was. The absolute refusal to accept the outcome of a game until the last whistle. The look on his face on the sideline when Michigan wasn't executing. The composure in the huddle in the national championship game when Washington was still in it. He was a Michigan quarterback. In the truest, fullest, most demanding sense of that phrase. He wore the winged helmet and led the team and fulfilled the expectation that had been building since the day he chose Ann Arbor. The NFL Draft has not been Michigan's primary identity marker the way it has been for programs like Ohio State or Alabama. programs that have made elite draft production a cornerstone of their recruiting pitch. But Michigan has produced professional talent of remarkable consistency across a century. From Tom Harmon, the first overall pick in the 1941 draft, to Aiden Hutchinson, the second overall pick in 2022, the program has sent hundreds of players to the professional level. Charles Woodson was the fourth pick in 1998. Desmond Howard was the fourth pick in 1992. Braylon Edwards was the third pick in 2005. Jake Long was the first pick in 2008, a Michigan offensive lineman taken first overall. The offensive line has been a particular strength across the Schembechler era and beyond. Michigan offensive linemen have been selected in the first round with a consistency that speaks to what the program teaches in the trenches. The foundational philosophy of winning at the line of scrimmage, of out-conditioning and out-toughening the opponent, translating to draft selections decade after decade. In 2022, 5 Michigan players were drafted in the first 2 days. The national championship roster of 2023 was also among the most NFL-ready rosters in the Big Ten. Players who were going to get paid regardless of what year they declared, who stayed to finish what they started. That is a statement worth making. Players who had the option to leave for money chose to stay for something they valued more than money. In the era when nil has changed everything, that is not nothing. Let us spend one more moment with the concept of the Michigan man, because it runs through everything. It is a phrase that has been used for good and ill. It refers to a specific kind of person. Someone who understands what Michigan football is, who has been shaped by it or is capable of being shaped by it, who represents not just winning but a particular set of values and behaviors and priorities. The phrase was made famous by Schembechler, who used it to describe his players and his philosophy and his expectations. The phrase has also been used as a weapon. When Rich Rodriguez was hired, his critics said he wasn't a Michigan man. They meant it as a criticism of fit, of culture. Whether they were right or wrong about that judgment is a matter of perspective, but they were certainly right that he didn't fit. The experiment failed. Whether it failed because he wasn't a Michigan man, or because he was a bad fit for the roster he inherited, or because football is hard and some things don't work, the post-mortem arguments have never been fully resolved. What is clear is that the weight of Michigan man mythology has been both a gift and a straitjacket. It gave the program an identity that survived lean years, that kept alumni passionate and engaged, that made the program bigger than any single era. And it has also, at moments, been used to resist change, to gatekeep, to protect incumbents over talent. Kyle Whittingham is not a Michigan man in the traditional sense. He is from Utah. He built his program in Salt Lake City. He has no institutional connection to Ann Arbor. And yet, he might be exactly the right hire for this moment. Not because he is the most famous. Not because he played there or coached there. But because what Whittingham has demonstrated over 21 years is precisely what the Michigan man concept is actually supposed to mean. A commitment to excellence over convenience, a culture of accountability, a refusal to accept anything less than the program standard. He wins with less. His budget at Utah was a fraction of what Michigan can offer. His recruiting footprint was limited. And he still won the conference. He still beat major opponents. He still built a program that, when he left it, was competitive and proud and headed in the right direction. That is what the Michigan man concept, at its best, actually describes. And Whittingham has it. Even if he's never called himself one. September 1, 2007. We have to go there. We have to spend time with the game that Michigan fans still cannot fully explain, cannot fully account for, cannot fully put away. Michigan entered this game ranked 5th in both major polls. They were at home in the Big House in front of 109,000 fans against Appalachian State, a team from the football championship subdivision, the second tier of college football. The Mountaineers were defending FCS national champions, but they were still FCS. They played against smaller programs, smaller budgets, smaller everything. Michigan had Chad Henne, Mike Hart, Jake Long, Sean Crable. 4 seniors who had turned down the NFL draft to come back and chase a national championship. They were favored by margins that some people found almost embarrassing to quote. Appalachian State kicked a field goal with 26 seconds left to take the lead. And then, as if the scoreboard weren't already enough, as if the moment didn't already feel impossible, Michigan lined up to attempt a field goal of their own to win. Appalachian State blocked it. Final score, Appalachian State 34, Michigan 32. It remains the most shocking upset in college football history. Appalachian State became the first FCS school to defeat a ranked FBS program. Michigan dropped out of the top 5 entirely, the first time any team had done so after a single game. The loss reverberated across college football for weeks. It changed how people thought about scheduling. It changed how people thought about complacency. It became shorthand for a lesson that no program is above. Any given Saturday, someone can beat you. Lloyd Carr retired after that season. He was not fired, exactly, but the losses and the sense that an era had quietly ended made the end of the year feel like the end of something larger. It was. There is a moment in this history that perhaps encapsulates Michigan football more completely than any other single image. Not the 49-0 score in the first Rose Bowl. Not Tom Harmon's final game. Not Bo Schembechler and Woody Hayes staring across the field in 1969. Not Charles Woodson winning the Heisman. Not Desmond Howard in the end zone. Not Blake Corum running through Washington and Houston in January. The moment is this. The morning of November 17, 2006. In Ann Arbor. The Michigan football program woke up to learn that Bo Schembechler had died. The man who had coached them, who had defined them, who had given them everything, he was gone. On the morning of the Ohio State game. And the Michigan football team played that game anyway. They played it because Bo would have told them to. Because you always play the Ohio State game. Because the team is bigger than any individual, even the individual who taught you that the team was bigger than any individual. They lost. 42-39. A game they might have won. But they played. And in playing it, in honoring Bo by doing exactly what Bo would have told them to do, they told you everything you need to know about what Michigan football is at its core. It is not about the record. It is not about the national championships, the Big Ten titles, the players drafted, the size of the stadium. Those things are real and they matter and they are extraordinary. But they are not the soul of the thing. The soul of the thing is that when everything falls apart, when the coach is gone, when the scandal is real, when the program is hurting, the team plays. It shows up. It runs through the tunnel and hears the crowd and competes with everything it has. Because the team is all that matters. The team. The team. The team. And now, in the fall of 2026, Michigan under Kyle Whittingham will take the field for the first time with a new quarterback, a new system, and a new set of questions about what this program can be. The questions are fair. They are earned by what the program has been through. But they exist alongside something that hasn't changed and doesn't change and will not change regardless of what happens in any given season. Michigan is still Michigan. The record, 1,021 wins in program history. 362 losses. 36 ties. A winning percentage of 732 thousandths. The most wins in college football history. The Big Ten championships, 45 of them, stretching from 1898 to 2023. 45 conference titles over 125 years of playing in the oldest and most respected conference in the sport. The national championships claimed, 12 including the undisputed championship of 2023. The winged helmet. The stadium. The fight song. The tradition that goes back to Irving Kane Pond scoring a touchdown that the referee disallowed on a hot Chicago afternoon in 1879. All of that is there. All of it is intact. Nothing that happened in the last 3 years changed any of it. Bryce Underwood is 19 years old. He was the #1 recruit in the country. He is from Belleville, Michigan. He wanted to stay home. He wanted to wear the winged helmet and hear the victors and run through that tunnel and feel what 100,000 people at full volume actually feels like. He chose Michigan. He stayed when he could have left. He was voted captain by his teammates. He knows what he signed up for. Kyle Whittingham knows what he was hired to do. And Michigan football knows, in the way that only great programs can know it, that the standard never moves. That it is there every year, patient and permanent. That it survived the Rodriguez years and the Hoke years and the sign stealing and the December arrest. That it survived the 50 years between 1948 and 1997 and the 26 years between 1997 and 2023. The standard waits. And every fall the team rises to meet it. Let us take one final longer look at what makes this program unlike anything else in American sports. There is a thread that runs from 1879 to 2026. From Irving Kane Pond to Bryce Underwood. From the disputed kick in Chicago to the confetti in Houston. The thread is not a single style of play, the game has changed too much for that. It is not a single coaching philosophy, though Schembechler's shadow is long enough to cover most of it. It is not even the winning, though the winning is extraordinary and unmatched. The thread is the expectation. Michigan football exists with a permanent, immovable, non-negotiable expectation of greatness. Not just success, greatness. And that expectation is not imposed from outside. It comes from inside. From the people who wore the uniform before, from the coaches who built the culture, from the fans who kept filling the big house every single year regardless of what was happening. 100,000 people, every Saturday for 50 years. Not because Michigan was good every year. Not because every season ended in a championship. But because the program was worth believing in. Because the tradition was worth honoring. Because the game itself, played in that stadium, under those lights, in those colors, meant something that went beyond any single season. That is what Michigan has. That is what no rebuilding can take away and no scandal can fully destroy. The gap between Michigan's self-image and reality has been real, and it has been painful at moments. The Rodriguez years, the Hoke years, the sign-stealing scandal, the December arrest. None of that is invented or minimized. It is part of the record. It is part of what the program is. But so is Tom Harmon surviving 2 plane crashes and coming home. So is Bob Chapuis sheltered by Italian partisans, making his way back to Ann Arbor, running the ball for the 1947 national champions. So is Desmond Howard striking the Heisman pose in the Ohio State end zone because he was in the moment and forgot everything except the joy of the thing. So is Charles Woodson from Fremont, Ohio, proving every week of his Michigan career that the choice to come to Ann Arbor was the right one. So is J.J. McCarthy, 27-1, raising his fists in Houston with the confetti coming down. So is Kyle Whittingham arriving in Ann Arbor at 66, telling a 19-year-old from Belleville that the job of the coaching staff is to help him become everything he can be. All of it is real. The highs are breathtaking because the lows are real. The victories mean something because the losses hurt. The standard matters because it has been maintained over a century and a quarter with a consistency that no other program can match. That is Michigan football. That is the winged helmet. That is 1,021 wins. That is the fight song written in one night, finished on a train, sung by 100,000 people ever since. That is Fielding Yost in 1901 and Bo Schembechler in 1969 and Jim Harbaugh in 2024 and Kyle Whittingham in 2026 and whoever comes next and whoever comes after that. The standard is permanent. The team endures. It is late now. The city of Ann Arbor is quiet outside your window, or it is buzzing in the particular way that a college town buzzes even in the off-season. Music from somewhere. Someone walking the diagram. The trees beginning to turn in the fall. And the stadium sitting there in the distance, empty and patient as it always is between seasons. The big house is always there. Even in January. Even in the dead of winter when there is no football for months. It is there the way cathedrals are there, as a statement of what people believe and what they are willing to gather for and what they will not stop coming to no matter how much time passes. More than 100,000 people, every home game for 50 years. Not once has it been fewer. In a few months, the Wolverines will run through that tunnel again. Bryce Underwood will take a snap and have a decision to make. Kyle Whittingham will stand on the sideline in a headset. The crowd will be enormous and loud and expectant in the way that only Michigan crowds are expectant, which is to say they will assume greatness and accept nothing less, and they will also love these players with something fiercer than reason. That is what waits for Michigan football in 2026. After the scandal and the firing and the arrest and the coaching change and the 2 years of trying to sort out what the program is and where the standard went, after all of that, the game is still there. The helmet is still there. The fight song is still there. And somewhere in the stands, if you are quiet and you listen, you might hear it. Not from the band. Not from the speakers. From the crowd itself, rising together as it always has. Hail to the victors valiant. Hail to the conquering heroes. They are not finished. Not even close. Go Blue. Good night, Michigan fans. Good night, college football world.